And now it's recording. All right, so before I start on this Zoom session, does anyone have any questions about MySQL or SQL type databases? And again, we're going to go with the same format where everyone is going to first, post other stuff. Oh, hey, what's up?
Hey, I just saw a Zoom link and I had to take it.
It's the way to go. If you guys have questions, just you guys can unmute yourself and then just say, "Hey, what's up? I have a question." If you don't want to do that, you can just type it in the chat and just be like, "Yes, I have a question." All right. Cool. All right. So let's start this up. Right now, we're going to review MySQL databases. So we haven't finished 12.3 yet, so that's going to be covered tomorrow. Hopefully, those of you attending, you guys are on the same schedule. So 12.1 and 12.2, what we did was we covered SQL type databases. And more specifically, we covered how to work with MySQL, a specific database that uses SQL as its main language for querying the database. Now, we also then went into 12.2 with learning how to integrate MySQL with Node using the MySQL Node package. And so we were able to make calls to our local MySQL databases from Node.js using that package. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start working on the in-class exercises. First, though, it might make sense to share my screen. Let me just do that. Okay, so we have something in the chat already. Oh, here we go. So multi-shifty. Multi-shifties, what is your real name again? I definitely can hear you through the mute. You're still on mute. Now you're unmuted. Okay. Now, wait. Okay, hold
What
on.
is this even?
There we go. There we go. All right. What's your name again?
Mike.
Mike. There we go. All right. So Mike, yeah, share the resources that you have.
Oh, I mean, I just dropped something with you in case you hit week 13, which sort of integrates the entire package.json creation, as well as integrating the database and then serving it up to the front end and how that all makes sense. I created that initially as a resource, as a catch-up project to give everyone a baseline of information for my own class back about 3 months ago. I just figured in case there was still any question, it's excessively commented and it's designed as a walkthrough lecture. So
Excellent.
I just figured you said you were in 12.2, 12.3. I figure you might just need this soon, just in case.
Yeah, actually, could you please just send it to everyone?
Oh, sure. I'd love to.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I mean, even if you just look through the finished app and skip the lesson plan entirely, there's still a lot of excessively commented code for those who are wondering how everything works.
That's awesome. That's very much appreciated. So thank you so much, Mike.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let's go to our exercises. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the exercises that we've been working on. I'm going to start off with 12.1. So let's go with some of the SQL commands. Now, in my class, what we did was I showed you guys three different ways of three different methods of inputting SQL into our database or interacting with our MySQL database. We went and used SQL Pro, mostly for Mac users. We used MySQL Workbench, and then we also used the CLI commands. So depending on what you wanted to do, you could still get the same result across all three of those. So I'm going to do the same thing again, where I'm going to open up SQL Pro. And again, we have this little connection module over here. So I'm just going to connect. And we choose our databases on this little handy dandy bar. And of course, our queries are made using this little query. Pretty easy to use. Let's see, we already have, show me how to do this via Windows. No, go away. So we're going to have MySQL Workbench, which is the inferior. No, actually, yeah, I think it's more powerful. It's just very convoluted. So if you want something that's like, fully functional, has all the bells and whistles, everything inside of it, but a terrible interface, so this is the way to go, MySQL Workbench. So we have MySQL Workbench over here on the right-hand side, and we have SQL Pro on the left-hand side. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to open up my CLI, so my command line interface for MySQL. And if I just type in MySQL -u, and again, it depends on what your username is. I'm just going to put in root because that's my username for MySQL. And again, this might not work if you haven't set up your path variables. Again, I said that's pretty complicated, but it is something important to understand. If you are interested in learning how to set up path variables, I'd first suggest Googling setting up my export path for Unix-based machines. If you have a Linux or a Mac, if you guys install this via Homebrew, those path variables are already set up for you, so that if you type in MySQL, it then checks the path to where MySQL is, and it understands the command for MySQL. If you have a PC, it's going to be done using configuration variables set through a different method. So I would suggest taking a look at how to access, so the search query would be that you'd put into Google is how to access MySQL from the command line PC. And for Mac, I don't think anyone should have issues with this. For Linux, it would just be setting the export path variable. Okay, so I'm going to do this, hit enter, and the -p indicates that, hey, you have to enter a password. I'm going to enter in my password. Again, a lot of you guys haven't set up passwords, so just be empty. You can just hit enter. And now I'm taken to the CLI. So the CLI just allows me to put in SQL commands directly along with some other commands, and allows me to interact with my local SQL database. First my local SQL server, which has all my databases on it. So if I want to show all the databases that exist, I do show databases, and notice that I have ButtsDB, MusicDB, SuperButts, Favorite Ice Cream, and all these other ones that we created during class, right? Some of them that are more for stuff that I'm creating, like Travel Secure, and then Monster, just fun stuff I like making too. So this is all in the same process. And if we go to our SQL Pro, we have the same thing on the left-hand side, right? And in MySQL Workbench, you have this terrible interface, but it's very, very robust. Like there's a lot of things in it. It's very verbose. So you have everything that you need, but essentially these are the three different ways of looking at the databases. So we've now connected to our local database, and we know where to look, and we have our databases set up. Now, we did set these up earlier with setting up the local host connection, meaning that we're connecting to 127.0.0.1. If you didn't, you might run into issues if you just put in localhost and for some reason your configuration path is not set for localhost to equal 127.0.0.1. I've seen issues with that, but that's very rare. I don't think I've had that in class yet. I have seen issues where students have used the MySQL package manager, and a lot of PC students have this, where they'll set up a temporary password and they'll forget to write it down. Make sure you guys, write down your temporary passwords. You can access it again. It's horrible. I mean, it's not that bad, but it's just a hassle to have to, you could just do the nuclear option if you don't have any data, which is just to uninstall and reinstall and all that stuff, but that becomes a hassle. All right, so on the CLI, it's like we're using the query in MySQL Pro. Yes, correct. It's very similar to that, where you can put queries in directly and I'll get information. So if I say, first I have to say use database, so use, what did we use last time? I think it was ice cream or something like that. MusicDB, here we go. Let's use MusicDB. So if I do that, make sure I end up with a semicolon. And now database has changed. So if I do select all from, actually I can just do show tables first. So show tables. So I have one table songs. So what I'm going to do is select all from songs. Oh, semicolon. There you go. So notice that we have our songs that we made, but in our terminal instead. And the display isn't as nice. It's a lot more matrixy. Not the math matrix, I mean the movie matrix. So notice that we have our IDs and columns and everything, and might not match up. Let's see, there we go. Now it looks nicer because we have a bigger screen. And the information still shows in tabular form. But if we wanted to see this information in a nicer way and be able to interact with it using a GUI, then the GUI is a lot nicer for that. For instance, if I go to the same thing in MusicDB and I click on songs and go to content, and I'm able to actually edit information here. And what happens is when I edit this kind of information, it actually makes a SQL query on the back end, so behind the scenes, to change this information. So the bad and the fluffy, let's change that. And if I run a query again, whoa, it just went full weird. Okay. Hold on. Show tables. I should, okay, hold on. Use, where is it? Use music DB. Show tables. Show all from songs. And now we have the bad and the fluffy. So notice that it's still making a request to the same table. And you can still see the changes here. But to make those changes from the CLI, you'd have to type in commands. So it's a little bit more difficult. Yes, thank you, Mike. Okay, so next what we're gonna get into, so first off, any questions about this and the process that we went through for setting up MySQL? So we work with SQL on GUI or CLI mostly. So CLI is purely optional. SQL, it depends on what you wanna do. Like when I was working on the Rails application at my last job, we actually wouldn't run queries directly to change data because it bypasses validations on the data. Now, this is not necessary because you could have data validations through stored procedures on the database, but we didn't have that. Instead, what we did was we made calls from our application from the back end, which is what we're going to be doing on our Node.js application. And then those would have the data validations before submitting information to the database. Now, if you still wanted to, you could have things, stored procedures on the database, essentially just functions that execute, and they could perform their own data validations once data comes in, to have some redundancy in terms of security. To then check your data before it goes in. So there could be some issues. Like if you guys, I think a couple of my students are already working on Rails apps. They might tell you, hey, like your work might tell you, hey, don't make SQL query calls directly from the SQL Pro GUI or from the CLI or anything like that. Instead, if you want to, I mean, a select statement is fine. But if you want to change data, that means the create or the update, then, or delete especially, then do it from the Rails application, where then it has validations built in, so you're not messing anything up. So just something to keep in mind when we're working on production applications. And this is the process we're going to transition into with using SQLize, or we're going to be using object relational mapping through SQLize to then make SQL queries from there instead of us making direct SQL queries. But it is still important to understand how SQL queries work, mostly for reading from databases, because that is still very much a manual process sometimes. Like let's say that you're working at some company and they want you to get some data from the database, right? And they're just like, all right, I just want a quick analysis on something like, how many people came to our website last 20 days that are between the ages of this and this, and also have the last name of Wolfenstein, right? And you can return that really easily using a select from statement. So it was something that I did end up using a lot that I didn't think I was going to be using a lot. So SQL queries can be really important, and it's fairly easy to pick up because the syntax is very similar to like the grammar structure of the English language, right? So it's not like for in loops or anything like that. It's like, hey, select this from this. Okay, any questions so far? All right. So let's get to it. So first thing we did was before we start using the database, we have to first create a database, right? So we have this .sql file, and notice that it says create database. Now, normally I don't run a file to create a database unless I'm creating a schema. Now we're going to be creating schemas tomorrow. So that's Saturday. And the reason that we create schemas, and schemas are just like the structure of our applications, right, on the database. So how our database is structured, let's say that I have this database and I have everything structured and, all these tables structured, and, I have people, I have, animals, I have all kinds of things, right? But that only exists on my local database. So how could I send that information to production database or even to other people? Now, you might want to think about this for a couple minutes. I want you guys to discuss amongst yourselves, and Mike, don't give them the answers right away. I want them to think about this. No cheating. So the question is, you guys have this database and this information on your local machine, and you want to export it so that everyone has the same schema. How would you go about doing that? So I'm going to BRB. Let you guys talk amongst yourselves. You can unmute.
So if we're working on the same project, would we all be pulling from the same GitHub? And is that how we would all have access to the same information? Anybody?
I don't know.
I think it's right. Because can you push SQL up to GitHub from you can push up to GitHub from this console, but maybe not from the workbench.
Yeah, I think I understand, not from the workbench, but from the, CLI. Okay. Nicholas, anything?
That's funny. I'm gonna guess. I'm not actually sure. I mean, I know that the MySQL that we were running was on a server. So somehow our teammates will have to connect to our server. I don't know how that's going to happen though. Because you'd have to be on the same network, which during the class time, we're on the same network. So
How would it work with like Firebase or something like that? Would it be the same?
So if we're all working off of Firebase, right, a database, then we would all have access to that. We just need access to the keys, right? To the directory. I forgot about Firebase, but yeah, that seems possible.
What the hell is this? Karunashi. Oh, damn it, Brandon. Stop sending memes. All right, so what was the consensus so far on setting the structure across multiple machines? Whether or not whether it's on production database, whether it's on someone else's local machine, what could be conceptually one way to do this?
Well, Brian was talking about the idea of Firebase. So if we're all working off of the same database, then we all have the same information running on our files, right?
Well, yeah, if you guys are using a production database and you guys are just accessing that same database, then you guys have access to that same one. That's correct. But let's say that you wanted to load your structure that you had on your local machine and have everyone else have that. Now, right now, our structure only exists on our local database. How do I export that? And the answer is actually all this. So it might seem a little weird, but this .sql file is actually an executable. And I showed you guys, I think, once in class, but I didn't really go over it. So the SQL file can be used to then execute if there's something that can interpret the information. So rather than us just manually putting this information in one at a time, you can actually do what's called a SQL dump, which I'm sure no one's going to forget, and use that information that was dumped from our database. So a SQL dump just means export, and depends on what you want to do. If it's just a schema, you can export just a schema, meaning how the database is structured, without necessarily all the data inside of the database, or you can get both. So it's a SQL dump of your structure and the data inside of your database, which is probably going to be a lot more information. And what that does is convert your structure and reverse engineers it into a SQL query, or not just one SQL query, but a whole bunch of SQL queries. And it might give you like a couple SQL files, or it might give you one giant SQL file. Now, what you can do with that is you can upload, or you can run that SQL file, and it'll just execute from top to bottom, just like you would with the JavaScript file. So if I were to execute this SQL file, Mario, what would the line 2 do?
It would create the database.
Yes, and the name of the database is?
Animals_DB.
Correct. Now, Brian, line 5, if I have use animals DB, from there, what is it doing?
It's going to use the database that's called Animals DB.
Correct. So if we use, so it's very intuitive, right? The clauses actually make sense. The keywords that SQL uses are very intuitive to use. From here onwards, it's pretty intuitive. So what it's doing is it's creating the structure. So it's creating a table called people. From here, notice we're still not creating any data. We're just setting up the structure of our table. So this table is going to have 5 columns. The first one's called ID. The data type is integer, and it's going to be auto-incremented, and it cannot be set to null. So if someone creates a new piece of information, so if a new piece of information comes into the people database as a new row, then there has to be an ID, there has to be a name, and there has to be a has pet. Notice that pet name and pet age are not set to not null. So that means they could be empty and they could be null. So these are not required per se, right? But you have to have a name, and whether or not someone has a pet is important. Notice that when you guys are using Booleans inside of your MySQL database, it's going to look like a data type that says tiny int. And that's because the SQL type databases, they read it as 1 or 0 instead of true or false. So it's very similar. 0 is false, 1 is true. So any questions so far about this? We're going to be working with primary keys, I think, tomorrow. So don't worry about primary keys yet. Those have to do with relationships between tables.
So will the database prompt you if it must be entered a value?
It just wouldn't execute.
Okay.
You'd run into an error. And hopefully this isn't done in a manual fashion. It's done through data validations, which is why the data validations we have either through the application or as like stored procedures on the database itself, or maybe both.
So like when we input stuff, like a new username on a website, it's going through this?
Yeah, correct. So now we have the new user that Mario was talking about. So we have this insert into. Now, because we're all like 12 years old, we always giggle at this, right? Insert into people. So at this point, we're inserting some information, and this is creating rows of information, right? So the first row, this has a correspondence of name, has pet name, pet age. Notice that we didn't do ID. Why didn't we include ID into this insert statement? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it auto increments, right? We don't want to manually set that. If we manually set information, we're definitely going to run into, we could run into, yeah, I mean, you're definitely going to run into conflicts. I was thinking race conditions, but I don't think it'd be race conditions. It would just be mostly conflicts of multiple people with the same IDs, which would be insane. And you have the same thing with, people with Jacob, True, Missy. Notice that this one's a little bit different, but it's still valid. Why are lines 30 and 31 still valid? It seems like it only has 2 columns that it's putting information into, and the values that are replacing or that are being put into there, they're not as many as this one. It's only 2 values instead of 4. So wouldn't that run into an issue? Correct. Yes. So Brandon mentioned that, yes, the other ones can be null. These are the only ones that don't have data validations on them. And next we have this, let's see. Oh, where did it go? Oh, here it is. So if you wanted to update information, and this is nice. I'm having like a TA that's not even my TA, just helping out. So thank you, Mike. So if I have an update statement, that fulfills the update part of CRUD, right? So if I want to update information, this part's really important, especially when it comes to gaming, right? So, I mean, it's actually important across a lot of different applications. I guess an easier one to think about would be Facebook. That's something that a lot of people use, right? If you want to update not just your login info, but like, all kinds of information about yourself, like your status, maybe like your relationship status or things like that. These are all updates to existing fields. So if you wanted to run an update on that, then you just do set haspet, or you wouldn't do set haspet, but you'd use this update statement. And instead of using the values, use this set, and you pass it name value pairs, and the name represents the column name and what you want to update it to. So we want to set haspet to true for this one, along with pet name equals Franklin and pet age equals 2. And you don't want to do that across everybody. What you want to do is you set it only where the ID equals 4 in this case. Now, this is a good way of updating just one person, right? So this finds the ID of that user. It would update their haspet, pet name, and pet age to the relevant information. Now, at the very end, this is something that just does a read. So this is just finding all the information, all the columns from people, and getting back all the different rows that exist inside the people database. Or sorry, inside the people table, not database. So questions about that so far? I did create, read, and update. I haven't executed them, but I just went through them really quick. Five more seconds.
Is this line 24 and to 31, are those like just instances of that? I don't know. I just thought about it as instance of that object, right? But it's just going into a table.
Yeah, it's not really like object. It's more like, yeah, just information going inside.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can think of it as like a new object if you want, but it's really just like rows inside of a table. Cool. So again, you can execute these queries directly into your editor. So if you did SQL Pro, you'd put it in here and you can execute them. So if I did this, you know, do that. And notice that, you know, I'd be executing into songs, so it'd be a different schema. So make sure that you're using the right query for the right database.
So the top, line 24, is what rows you want to put it into, but it has to also coincide the values with the placeholders. Oh,
correct.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Is MySQL queries via CLI also care about semicolons a lot? Oh, does MySQL queries, do MySQL queries via CLI matter a lot? Yeah, they do. In this case, they're the end of a statement. They're very important. So it's going to assume that if you don't have a semicolon, you're continuing a statement. Yeah, as Mike just mentioned. Okay, so from here, let's go on to, let's see, a more difficult one. Not this one, actually. Let's do this one. Oh, that's real easy. Okay, so let's just move on to using Node with MySQL. So what we've done is, yes, and Brian, you can definitely insert multiple lines at once, especially if you use set or if you use something like this. So if I did this, this would create 2 rows. Or I could use set, and we're gonna see that inside of our Node application real quick. So let me go back to it. So inside of our node application, now this goes back into tying it with live things, right? So this is not a computer science program where we just teach you theory and then there's no application. Everything here is directly applied, right? So if we have our icecreamdb connection.js, this is in 12.2 and activity 1. So we have this connection equals MySQL.create connection, and we have our MySQL package. Now, I want to do a little review. So I want you guys to open up icecreamdb connection.js, and I want you guys to review what the different parts of this are. So line 1, lines 3 through 13, and then lines 15 through 18. So you guys a few minutes to work on that, and then I'm going to be asking you guys what the different parts of this do, and how to execute this file as well.
All right, so who understands this one?
Are there any questions about this one?
Where's that file at? Okay, I guess I gotta pull that. Never mind.
This one is just like the front end of, I think it's just like the front end of SQL Pro when we log in.
All right, Karunashi, is your server running? Just making sure. Have you tried running your SQL server on your computer? Because the server needs to be running for your program to connect to it. That could be an issue. Interesting.
Hey, so what are we supposed to be thinking about?
We're just looking at this little piece and saying, what does each line do? And then how do we run it?
So tell me, what do you think each line does? Let's start with line 4, or actually line 3. What do you think line 3 is? I will take volunteers at this point.
Is it what server we're going to be running off of?
Well, it looks like line 3, we're just declaring a variable. We're pulling in the MySQL package via the require statement. And it looks like .create connection is probably a method inside of that MySQL package. Inside of there, it looks like it is a function that takes a single object as a parameter. So you'll see the curly brackets start at the end of line 3 and end at the beginning of line 13. That's all a single function. It takes an object as a parameter.
Yeah.
Inside of there, it looks like it takes the parameters of host, port, user, password, and a database.
That's a good answer. Good job.
Now, which one of the if you were to change any of these, what do you think would happen?
I think that you lose connection.
Well, if you change the user or the password, it would just log you in differently. So, or the database, if you want to access a different database.
Ah, there you go. Now, you're connecting to localhost. That'll always connect you to ports on your own computer. But what if you want to connect to a different database on the cloud or the internet?
Okay.
So thank you, Mike. Brian, did you want to answer that?
Well, wouldn't the screen change here, but wouldn't localhost be just like a path to like a local server? I mean, to a server, like, I don't know.
Yeah, Mike was saying that localhost is something that runs off of your own computer.
So what do you think is going to happen if someone on the internet trying to connect to your project is trying to connect to your local computer?
Are we being hacked? Is that what happens?
There's one way to find out.
Okay.
Now, if they're trying to refer to localhost, how does their computer know what localhost is? When they're trying to connect to localhost, oh, there we go. Yep, they'll try to connect to their own computer. That might just be a problem, wouldn't it? Okay, it looks like Omar's back. I'll hand the floor back to him.
Thank you, Mike. So we have an ability to connect to our local machines and the ability, like Mike mentioned, to connect to remote machines as well. So far we've been running a local MySQL server on the port 3306. We haven't really gotten to ports yet, but essentially it's just, think of it as a shipyard. If your shipyard was a giant server, you'd have different places that can hold multiple ships, right? So you can have each port holds one area that you can connect to. In this case, we have our local database server running on port 3306. Now, there's a huge range of numbers that you can choose from, but by default, it's set to 3306 for MySQL. Now, if I wanted to execute this file, notice that the first line tells me I need to require MySQL. Now, is that an internal or external node package? External, exactly. So what do I need to do in order to use that node package? Install, yes. So if it was an internal node package, like for instance, file system, then we could just require it and that'll be it. So in order to utilize it, first from the command line, let me cd into it. Exit command line. All right, so now I'm in the place that I want. And what I have to do is type in npm install and the name of the package, right? So MySQL. Now, that would install the package for me to use locally in that project folder and every subdirectory within it. However, that wouldn't be translatable to other projects if anyone else wanted access to it. I mean, I could have them just, download my node modules, but that's huge and it has different variations in terms of node modules. So what's a better way of instead of me just installing MySQL, what's a better way of me installing MySQL? What additional argument can I give it? Save, exactly. Kathy, is that Catherine? Kathy, where are you from? Oh, cool. So you're in the Rutgers program? Excellent. Welcome, Kathy. So this is mostly the UCLA nerds. I'm glad the other nerds made it too. All right, so if we do npm install MySQL, and if we do -- save, it'll be saved to a file. However, I can't just save it anywhere. I need to do what first?
npm init to create a JSON package?
Exactly. Well, the package.json, right? So I first name it. Remember, no capitalizations. I'm just going to call this Brandon is a nerd because he's claiming that he's not. Sorry, if you're in this class, you're a nerd. You're going to have to be part of this, the collective. From here, we can then execute our command. Do npm install MySQL -- save. And if we open that up, we have MySQL under dependencies instead of our package.json. So now I don't need to send this entire folder with node modules inside. I can actually ignore this node module so that it doesn't get uploaded to GitHub. And that way, whenever someone clones or forks my repository, all they get is the information like the package.json and the individual files. So basically everything else outside of the git ignore. Now, in order to install everything that's inside the package.json in terms of dependencies, what do they have to execute? Like, let's say someone cloned my application, ice cream with no connection. How would they then use that? How would they get all the dependencies? Yes, npm install. Ooh, Rutgers. So last time it was Northwestern that was winning. Now it's Rutgers that's beating you guys out. All right.
Also, as long as there's a moment, what is one other good reason not to send everyone the node modules folder and instead send them the package.json?
Have the most current, download the most current npm package?
Yes.
Excellent there. All right, UCLA is up by 1. Now it's even? All right. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know who's keeping track of points. I think Brian definitely looks like he's keeping track of points. All right, so next we have our username, our password. This is really important. Now, this kind of information for your local machine, fine, no one really gives a shit. You can't really hack into someone else's local machine unless you're using some crazy software, right? However, if you're using this for production databases, you probably don't want these connection details to be public. So what you're going to be doing is when we use a, let's see, what are we going to be? Well, we're going to be using Heroku. But no matter what you use, like even if you guys were using like AWS, what is it, Elastic Beanstalk for their server service, or if you're using GCP or whatever it is that you guys are using, then what you can do is you can store your different passwords and usernames and all that stuff into environment variables. Now, these environment variables are actually stored, not local environment variables, but stored onto these servers environment variables. That way, whenever you upload your files, you call the environment variable, and it'll get automatically injected from the server into your files auto-magically. And that way, you have all your information secure. So bada bing makes things super secure, and you should never put your real username and password. Our database that we're choosing to use is Ice Cream Paint Job. From there, we have our connection object that we are using. So this is our connection. From there, we have a method on this object called connect. Remember that node is error first. And what happens is you say console.log connected ID and then connection.thread ID. Don't worry about threads right now. Just basically, if it gives you, if it doesn't give you an error and it says you're connected and it gives you an integer, then you are connected. All right, any questions about that? Nine? Okay. So let's go to this one. So this one was a little bit more difficult. If we're trying to make queries to our database, and this is whether you're local or in production, then you use the query. So the query is actually a method on the connection object and allows us to make direct SQL queries. However, what gets returned is not a string of all the database stuff. It's actually an array of objects. So notice that, and let me do a text wrap. So if I do a text wrap, then what you see here is the first thing that gets returned, of course, nodes callbacks are all error first. Second one is going to be the response. So, or the result, or whatever you want to call it. I could just name it as butt poop. But for here, what we do is we take that array of objects and we loop through it and we see all the information come back one by one. So if I wanted to display the entire object, so it's actually an array of objects. So if I want to display that, and just do res. If I wanted to pretty print it, I could do stringify, json.stringify, set the res as the first argument, then set, I don't need to iterate over it, so null for the second argument. Third argument could be how much spacing you want, 2, 4, 6, 8, all that stuff. Let me execute this. So this is number 3. So we go here, and we do node playlist read. And notice that it's giving me an error when I try to execute it. Why is it giving me this error? Install it, yes. All right, so I do npm install, MySQL. I don't really care about sharing this with anyone else. I'm not going to create a package.json. I'm very selfish. So I'm just going to run node playlist read.js, and it might work. Let's see. No, it's giving me an error. Access denied. Why is that? Why would I get an access denied? I'm glad you're keeping track of points. Pass, yes. Password. So my password for my local machine is this, and I don't care because you guys hopefully can't hack into my local machine. So let's execute that again. And I'm still getting an error. So what is this error about? No DB. Is it actually no database? Wrong database. Excellent. So the database that I'm trying to access is actually music DB. And let's double check that. Look at this little conversation on the right-hand side. All right, so we have, let's see, what was the name of it? Music DB. Yep, that's right. All right, cool. So if I have that, now I try to run it, and boom, it actually gives me back what I want. Now notice that the first thing is the connection. The second one is this array of objects. How can I tell it's an array of objects? Yes, the array bracket notation, and Nicholas mentions the object notation. So array of objects. Excellent. Excellent work, guys. And you can notice that each one is separated with this comma after the bracket. So each one of these objects is just another element in this array.
You know, for the homework, when I console logged, I guess that raw data packet is like a constructor function?
Yeah, most likely it's a constructor function.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's coming from the prototype. The prototype is essentially just a row data packet. So each of these objects is an instantiation of row data packet. All right. So notice that because we know it's coming back as an array of objects, then we can just do a simple for loop because it's just an array. And we just do it based on the length of the array. How many objects are in there? How many elements are in there? And then we just print out all that stuff, make it look all nice. It's nice. So from here we have select from songs. And we have another one. This is a little bit weirder. Can anyone explain what lines 27 through 28 do? Yes, star means all. So we're selecting all what? All songs table, all, well, all represents what? All what? Not all tables.
Everything within the category?
Not necessarily. All within, all what? All columns. Yes, Kathy. So all the columns within a table called songs. Okay? So if you did just this, what you do is just get back the artist. So this would only get back the different, just the artist values inside of that column. But if you do all, then it gives you back all the columns. Now, if you do select all from songs where genre is equal to this question mark, what does that question mark mean? And what is this next array? We didn't have that in here. We only had two values or two arguments being passed into that method. So what is this part over here? Correct, yes. Well, not links to, but we're doing some interpolation, right? So we're able to dynamically insert data using an array of values. So if we have this array and the first element being placed into this question mark is dance, then let's say I had another question mark in here. And let's say that there's a one-to-one relationship in terms of index to the question space. Then if I had multiple things, so multiple questions, then what could I do? You can do like artist equal question mark. You mean like this? So what can I do with this? Actually, I don't even know if this is proper SQL syntax. I think it is. Whatever.
I believe that is correct.
Okay. Thank you. So what could I do here? Would these both be dance inside here? What could I add inside here to then replace this second question mark? What is this purpose of the array?
Yeah. It's a comma and another string.
Right? That's it. So what this does allows us to pass in arguments dynamically to then pass into this, this query string. Excellent. And later on, we're going to go into passing in objects. But essentially, this just returns the object in the same form, right? So when we looked at the information, we got undefined, no diggity, hip hop. Oh, why is this undefined? I thought I put in ID correctly. Why am I getting undefined? I know what the answer is, but it's something very simple.
is it that the
Yep.
information? Okay.
That was it. Oh, sorry. I saw the answer already, and I was like, oh, that is. So yes, syntax. Execute it again. Get it back. So I actually prefer lowercasing all of my my column names. And if you want to get the information back in a certain way, what you can do is use aliases. We haven't really gone to aliases yet because we're not really going into information reporting. Information reporting is good if you're like a data analyst or things like that. But it's actually very easy to do. You just do this as keyword, and then you could say, okay, return it so that the column says, you know, instead of just artist, it would say artist's name or something. Oh, instead of title, it'd be like title of the movie. And so the column names return like in a nicer way. Yes, thank you for the cheat sheet. There's another really good one from for just SQL commands that one of the students posted from Team Treehouse. No one was
I'll find it.
Thank you. All right, so finally.
Oh, so Omar, so like line 27 where it says select all from, we're selecting all tables or rows or columns?
Rows? What is it? Oh.
Select all from genre.
So we answered this earlier. Remember, what is the all represent? Select all. Let's say I just do artist. So artist is a
like a singer or
yeah, it's a column. Yeah, not in terms of what an artist is outside of programming at this point. We're thinking programmatically. All right, change the way you think. Don't be a normal person anymore. So if I do that, oh, why is it returning back undefined? Oh, because I changed this back. Okay. I do this. I do this. And I don't think I actually have any genre that has dance. I don't think it's returning anything. So let me put rapper. Brandon, why are you trying to confuse everyone? Is that regex? What the hell is that? No, I don't trust you. No, I don't trust you. Definitely not. No, no trust. Undefined, undefined, Migos. Oh, that's interesting. So, oh, I see. Okay. So because the for loop is going back from all the information coming through, notice that we're getting undefined. So this is actually expected. Why is this undefined? Why are all these undefined? I asked for just artist, but then I thought I was looping through the objects. So why am I getting undefined for everything else? Close. Yes, I didn't return those columns. So I'm not looping for just artists. I'm actually looping for everything else, but I'm returning only the artist. Therefore, if I try to loop over the other elements that don't exist, then it's like, well, I have no idea what those are. Those are undefined. So instead, if I just did that, I get Migos and Migos, which is correct. It's the artist making such hits as The Bad and the Bougie Touch and The Bad and the Fluffy. All right. right, so now we have Great Bay Basic. So this one was probably the most difficult, right? You guys had the Coders Bay or whatever it was called. And now you have this Great Bay. So this one has all this information in there, and it was pretty difficult. So you guys are supposed to create an application in class with a limited amount of time. And it would allow you to either post information or post an item or bid on an existing item. So to do that, we created this start function. So we did our whole connections, bada bing, we have our connection stuff in here. And then we create this start function. So the start function, it allows us to then get information whether or not the user chose post or bid. If it's post, then we're gonna go to our method called, or our function called post auction. It's bid, then bid auction. Anyone confused so far? Cool. All right, so we have our post auction. So let's say they wanted to add items into our application. So what we do is we say, okay, what is the item that you would like to submit? What category is it going to be in? And what's going to be your starting bid? And you're going to have a validation on there as well to make sure that you're putting in a real number. That makes sense. Then we have our promise execution with our implicit object being passed in to our callback. From here, we have a connection.query. So we haven't used this before, right? We haven't done this with an inquirer. So what this does is allows us to put information in dynamically, right? So notice that we're using multiple things that we learned at the same time. So why don't I step away for a little bit, like just a couple minutes, and have you guys analyze this and see what it does.
So all this information is just being taken from the inquiry that the user input. So they input the product name, the price, the category, starting bid, and it's just the, right here on line 61, it's the information, the user input that's being returned back, and we're just doing something with that data. We're gonna make a query, insert into auction set. Right, guys?
And here comes Mario coming in to take all the internet points.
I think, yeah, no. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so that sounds pretty good. I think the function answers, that's the callback from the inquirer.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're making a new connection. The query statement that we're running is that first argument. We're going to insert into auctions, maybe that's a column. And then there's a callback after that, which will set some of this data. And then the next thing after that is the error, which, because node is error first, but I don't know, it's weird that it's second, but that's what I've been
Who's
told.
playing that music?
Maybe that's me.
There you go.
Oh yeah, I'm at Panera Bread.
Oh.
Yeah, and line 63, I guess, is something we're using, a method we're using off of the MySQL package. Right, Nick?
Sorry, what was that?
That line 63 is methods we're using from MySQL package. Right after inquire, then we take that information and then use the MySQL
Yeah, I think queries, that's a method for sure. And then the connection is like a object or something, or some kind of variable that was created earlier, I think. So yeah, for the most part, I think you're correct. Yeah, query is the method though. I think that's, yeah, the method.
Now, tell me, what denotes to you that it is indeed a method?
Well, I don't recognize that in JavaScript. I only know JavaScript. I don't really know too much JavaScript, but that doesn't look familiar to me from JavaScript. And it's also, well, working with SQL, MySQL, and query is something that you would do to a database, or in this case, a MySQL database. It's a method because it has that dot notation.
Yep.
And it's also taking in arguments, which is first one, insert into auctions. Next one is an object, right? And then after that, it returns an error, I think.
I think Omar's on Facebook.
Yo, I'm on Facebook.
I'm just kidding.
I'm on I'm on Slack, so it's very similar to Facebook. All right, so what's the consensus? What do we got going? Mario, what do we got going?
All right, so we talked about all the information after we set the initial things and make sure that we're entering numbers and what function we're going to start off. We have the inquirer.prompt, and it asks us questions.
Mm-hmm.
Then after the user inputs for each query, I guess, I don't know. Then we return we return through with the callback on answer on line 61. We get back information, and then we pass that information into a method from the MySQL package. And answer is the callback, and then we're just selecting parameters from that object from the inquirer.
Yep. Well, you're just selecting different values based on the property name that you're passing in, right? And from there, you can actually use the MySQL syntax. Sorry, not MySQL syntax, but MySQL node package syntax. What it does is it does a conversion of taking this JavaScript object and it interprets it into SQL. So it does some processing over here and it's saying, okay, taking this object, and what we're going to do is we're going to convert that into SQL, and then when we pass it into MySQL, it will understand that SQL. But before that, it'll do some conversion from this information. And this is the part that's really powerful about the MySQL package, is that you can just use JavaScript and put it into SQL queries. All right, so from there,
what does that mean, turn it into MySQL, if we're getting back strings, right, on 64 to 67? And just...
We're not actually getting back strings. This is an object, right?
I guess values from that object. So what's the turn it into SQL part?
The SQL part is that this is taking an object. MySQL doesn't take in JavaScript objects. So the MySQL package does the conversion for, yes, thank you, Mike. Perfect. So it does a conversion for us, right? So this is a specific node package. And if you take a look at the node package, you guys could probably create something very similar because this functionality is not that difficult. It'll just be a hassle is all. All right, so from there, it just then executes the start method, or not method, I keep saying method. This is all just a function. So then it'll ask you again if you're doing a post or a bid. Now we get to bid. So now we have Did you see a video explanation of this exercise? Oh, yeah. Yeah, there is a video explanation of this. Did I send it out? I think Mike knows.
I legit have no idea.
Yeah, you definitely would not. Because this is on my own Slack channel. Let's see.
Yeah, I think you did send it out. I saw it yesterday.
Is it on general? When the hell did I send it? Oh, yeah, I did. Great pay. Okay. So I shouldn't go over it. Okay, I'm done. Cool. Well, that's that. Excellent. All right. So tomorrow we're going to be going over, let's see. I think it's just working with bigger data sets. And then I'm going to try and use some joins. So I would suggest reading up on inner joins, outer joins, and just essentially putting data together. If you just go on YouTube and then just look up like inner join, outer join, it'll usually do a pretty good job of explaining. It's pretty short. And that's when we're going to be using the primary key, foreign key kind of thing. All right. So with that, any other questions before I go? Thank you.
Yeah. So we worked on this on Monday and Wednesday, and sometimes it seems confusing when we work on these new things, but it does seem to just be understanding the syntax of the new packages or methods, right? But it's pretty easy to learn.
Yeah, the syntax is always just a little tricky, but it's something that you guys can always pick up on your own. The concept is what I want to get through to you guys, right? What's actually happening? Because the syntax is going to keep changing. Like how it's executed, that is constantly changing. Concepts, though, they stay pretty static. There's going to be new concepts coming out, but generally it's you have people programming the same things over and over and over, using the same patterns over and over and over. Okay, oh my God, what does Brandon want? Okay. All right, fine. I'm going to type this into console.log, and it's going to destroy my computer. But first, let me answer a more important one. So Brian was asking, what's the most important thing to focus on for studying? That's a very broad question. For studying what? For this program, for tomorrow, for...
Yeah. Basically, I just want to make sure I'm keeping up. So where do I want to put all my energy? With this, maybe I watch that video.
Yeah, I would definitely focus on watching that video. If you guys have already done the activities, if you guys have not tried the activities, try the activities first. Remember, you'll learn a lot more from struggling than you will from just watching something.
All right.
If you're ever feeling you're short on study, trust me, we can assign you things to study.
Yeah, that's true too. So if you want Mike to give you a hard time, then definitely just let me know, and then I can ask Mike. He's created a whole bunch of different tutorials and stuff like that. He has a bunch of GitHub.
I'm actually in the process of writing EX6 curriculum content. I've actually added you as a contributor so you can take a look.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Cool.
Also, if you have any suggestions, let me know because I have to present it to my class on Monday.
Okay, cool. Wait, which university you at?
Oh, I'm at UT. I'm the full-time TA for the full-time program, and because someone overlapped the schedules by accident, I'm now the substitute instructor for the last month of the part-time program.
Oh, geez. Wow, you're super busy then, huh?
And our student success manager messed up a little bit and told them that they would have content on ES6 and Redux that did not exist, so I'm creating this weekend so I can present it on Monday.
That's insane, man.
That's why I was on Slack. I was literally just working on creating content. I was like, oh, look, is that a link? I swear, links are like candy to me. I have to click them.
All right, I won't send you any more crack then. Oh, you said candy, huh? Well, crack is like candy to me.
Slang term.
If you guys have any more questions, just let me know. If not, I'm going to go enjoy the rest of my night.
So concepts, what are the concepts for, I guess, MySQL? Entering data, updating data.
Oh, so what I did was I sent out the topics to know. I've been updating that. That's updated. So if you take a look at the topics to know, it goes over exactly what concepts to cover. No problem. Take care, Kathy. So that document has all the different concepts. So actually, Mike, what I've been doing is essentially taking parts of the class objectives and instructor need to do's, and I've been putting into topics to know. And that way students know exactly what concepts they're supposed to know by now. So it's not very like specific. It's more like, what should they know by now? And I think that should be public, right?
I would agree about that. I mean, admittedly, our instructor, he reads the class objectives at the beginning of class and tells the students, here's what you should know by the end of today. And if you don't, and anything feels lost to you, let me know so we can connect you with tutors. Especially so in the full-time program. We simply don't have the time to afford for anyone to fall behind. If they need help, we need to know where they're at and how to get them the help they need as soon as possible. So that's what we reiterate from day one and every time they launch into a new part of the class.
That makes sense. So yeah, full-time program, in case you guys don't know, some of these running across the universities are running 3 months instead of 6 months. And they run like 5 days a week, right?
Yeah, let me shorten this into one sentence. Yeah. 2 homeworks a week. Sound good?
Insane. That's great.
I don't need to say any more about that.
Yeah, that's just nuts. Well, you guys should definitely check this out. Go through the different concepts for 12.2. I also put up 12.3. And we're going to be talking about exporting and importing information too. So I would suggest reviewing. If you guys are, feeling good about your MySQL progress so far, I would suggest from there going into SQL joins. And then if you're feeling super comfortable with that, then I would suggest starting to look up Express. Cool. Well, thank you, Mike, for joining us. Thank you, everyone else. I'll catch you guys tomorrow. See ya. Take care. Now you're here. All right, how the hell do I leave this again? I have no idea how to leave.
Bottom right next to the chat box.
Bottom right next to the chat box.
A little lower on the mouse. You see at the bottom of the screen where you have the invite, participants, screen share, chat, and record buttons?
Nope.
There's a gigantic red leave meeting button, I think.
Oh, I don't have that because I'm on a different view.
Oh, okay. You may have it. Are you in full screen mode by any chance?
I'm in here we go. I got it. All right. Thanks, man.
Hey, before you take off, I'm actually just going to go ahead and actually Slack you this because I added you as a contributor. I'm just looking for like syntax errors or anything. I'm working on that. So it's, just in case you were interested. Yes.
Yeah, let me add it to my Slack. Okay, got it. Cool. Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm definitely in Redux. So I'll be doing 3 weeks of React instead of 1 or 2 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, it's still in progress. It was sort of thrown on me as last minute because our student success manager announced by accident, but I'm trying to get that done in time. And if I get it done, I'll be able to redistribute it. I'm just going to the ES6 content first because I'm more familiar with that. And Redux obviously builds on the ES6. So step 1, then step 2.
Excellent, man.
I'll just see what happens by the end of the week.
Yeah, let me know. Because I think someone else created some structured React Redux content. Did you see that?
Was that Alex from the UT Austin? Because I did see his repository. There is no lesson plan, but it is a structured repository.
Is that what it is? Is that it's just a repo with like nothing in it, or?
Well, it's a repository. It has a little bit of code example, but it still has no, I'm going to say, lesson plan. So it's not exactly easy to redistribute amongst the universities. So that's what I was approaching with this, is trying to create a lesson plan as well as code examples that follows the structure that all the instructors are used to, notably the example, the activity, and then the solution, and then repeat, and so on and so forth. There was simply no lesson plan. So I'm having to recycle the content to make it applicable and reusable.
Got it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, let me know if that gets like finished, because actually, like if I'm planning on doing 3 weeks of React, there has to be like some time devoted to Redux. Yeah. And I'm like shitty with all these like newer front end frameworks, because when I was developing in my day, like we weren't using like React and Angular and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to like I understand them, but it's more like I'm not like a React or Angular.
Yeah, well, I mean, admittedly, with the lesson plan and all the explanations, you should be able to, pretty much read, observe, and then understand exactly what it's doing because it's designed to be shown to someone who has no experience. So that's what I'm hoping. But I myself, I probably bought like 4 courses on Udemy that I'm going to be watching this weekend and then creating content at the same time. So I'm just not going to sleep this weekend.
Yeah, you look like you're pretty cracked out at this point.
It's
like
alcohol.
You have way too much energy at this point, right?
Alcohol does that to you. Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like only 8:30 for us, but it's like probably like fucking 11.
It's like 10:30, and I'll be working on content for at least another 2 hours. And after that, I have to be up at 8 because I TA tomorrow.